What if the hardest part of gardening isn't your soil, your weather, or even your experience? What if the real problem is the vegetables you were told to grow? Every spring, millions of gardeners repeat the same exhausting routine. Delicate seedlings that demand perfect watering schedules, crops that collapse the moment temperatures rise, vegetables that seem to fight you every step of the way. But hidden in the pages of old farming journals and forgotten seed catalogs is a completely different story. A group of vegetables that once fed entire villages, survived brutal droughts, and produced harvests so reliably that families depended on them for generations. These plants weren't fragile. They weren't high maintenance. In fact, many of them spread so aggressively that farmers sometimes struggled to keep them contained. Yet somehow, over the past 100 years, they quietly vanished from modern gardens. Some disappeared because supermarkets preferred uniform crops. Others faded away because seed companies couldn't profit from plants you only needed to buy once. But the truth is, many of these vegetables still exist today. They grow fast. They thrive in poor soil. And some of them produce more food than the vegetables filling your garden right now. Today, we're bringing 15 of these forgotten survivors back into the spotlight. And by the time we reach number 15, you might start looking at your garden very differently. Because once you discover plants that practically grow themselves, it becomes hard to go back. Let's begin. Number 1. Malabar spinach. Malabar spinach is one of those plants that completely changes the way you think about leafy greens the moment you grow it. Most gardeners struggle with traditional spinach because it bolts the second temperatures climb, turning bitter and unusable almost overnight. Malabar spinach plays by a different set of rules. Instead of collapsing in summer heat, it thrives in it. This tropical climbing vine grows faster as the temperature rises, sending thick, glossy leaves up trellises, fences, and garden supports with almost unstoppable momentum. Gardeners often plant it thinking they'll get a modest harvest of greens, but within weeks, the plant begins stretching skyward, covering structures with lush foliage that keeps producing day after day. Its resilience is what made it such a dependable crop centuries ago, in warm climates where delicate greens simply couldn't survive. The real surprise comes once harvesting begins. Every time you snip a handful of leaves, the plant responds by producing even more growth, creating a cycle that can continue for months. Some gardeners report harvesting bowls of leaves every week from a single vine. Because it climbs vertically, it also saves precious garden space while delivering an almost continuous supply of edible greens. In neglected corners of gardens where other vegetables struggle, Malabar spinach quietly transforms empty structures into living walls of food, proving that sometimes the easiest crops are the ones we forgot existed. Number 2. Egyptian walking onion. The first time most gardeners see an Egyptian walking onion, they assume something strange is happening. Instead of producing seeds like ordinary onions, the plant forms small clusters of bulbs right at the top of its stalks. As those bulb clusters grow heavier, the tall stalk slowly bends toward the ground until the bulbs touch soil. Then something remarkable happens. Those tiny bulbs root themselves exactly where they fall, creating a new onion plant without a single seed being planted. Over time, the plant literally begins migrating across the garden, which is exactly how it earned its unusual name. For centuries, this strange survival strategy made Egyptian walking onions one of the most dependable vegetables a gardener could grow. Plant them once, and they quietly multiply year after year, expanding their patch without needing replanting. They tolerate freezing winters, survive drought, and continue producing long after many delicate crops have disappeared. Gardeners often underestimate them at first because the bulbs look small, but their productivity quickly adds up as new plants appear season after season. Both the green tops and the bulbs are edible, offering a steady supply of onion flavor throughout the year. What makes them especially valuable in low-maintenance gardens is their independence. Once established, they rarely require watering, fertilizing, or pest control. They simply keep spreading, slowly building a self-sustaining onion patch that practically manages itself while other vegetables demand constant attention. Number 3. Skirret. Long before carrots became the dominant root vegetable in many kitchens, skirret was quietly feeding families across Europe. At first glance, the plant looks unremarkable, producing tall stems and delicate white flowers that don't immediately hint at the treasure hidden beneath the soil. Underground, however, clusters of slender roots develop in bundles that resemble a natural harvest waiting to be discovered. Each root carries a subtle sweetness and nutty flavor that made skirret a favorite in medieval kitchens, where it was roasted, boiled, and added to hearty stews. One of the reasons this vegetable thrived historically is its ability to handle imperfect conditions. Unlike many modern root crops that demand carefully prepared soil, skirret tolerates heavier ground and inconsistent care surprisingly well. Once the plant establishes itself, it continues producing roots year after year from the same location, eliminating the need for constant replanting. Gardeners who rediscover skirret often find themselves surprised by how quietly productive it becomes. Instead of planting rows every season, they simply harvest some of the roots while leaving the plant alive underground. The remaining roots continue growing and dividing, ensuring future harvests without additional work. Because the plant returns every spring, it slowly becomes a permanent fixture in the garden. In a world of annual vegetables that require constant attention, skirret reminds us that some of the most reliable food crops were designed by nature to keep providing long after we've forgotten about them. Number 4. Lovage. Lovage is the kind of plant that makes gardeners question why it ever disappeared from modern kitchens. Growing tall and aromatic, this towering perennial herb can reach impressive heights in a single season, often rising well above other garden plants like a green fountain of fragrant leaves. Its flavor is bold and unmistakable, similar to celery but deeper and more complex, which is exactly why it was once a staple ingredient in soups, broths, and savory dishes across Europe. Families planted lovage near their kitchens because once it established itself, the plant rarely needed attention again. Unlike many delicate herbs that struggle through harsh weather, lovage thrives on neglect. It tolerates cold winters, poor soil, and occasional drought while returning every spring with renewed vigor. Gardeners who plant it often find themselves with far more leaves than they expected, because a single mature plant can produce an astonishing amount of aromatic foliage throughout the growing season. What makes lovage particularly valuable is its versatility. The leaves are harvested for cooking, the hollow stems can be used like celery, and even the seeds carry strong seasoning potential. Over time, the plant becomes a permanent resident in the garden, growing stronger with each passing year. In old cottage gardens, it was considered almost indestructible, quietly providing flavor and nutrition without demanding constant care. In many ways, lovage represents a forgotten philosophy of gardening, where plants were chosen not for convenience in supermarkets, but for their ability to provide abundance with almost no effort. Number 5. Groundnut. Apios americana. Groundnut is one of the most fascinating edible plants hidden in North American agricultural history. For thousands of years, it served as an important food source for indigenous communities, long before European crops arrived on the continent. The plant itself grows as a climbing vine that twists through surrounding vegetation, producing clusters of small flowers above ground. But its real value lies beneath the soil. Underground chains of tubers develop along the roots, forming a series of nutritious nodules that resemble a natural string of edible pearls buried in the earth. These tubers are rich, slightly nutty in flavor, and packed with protein compared to many other root crops. What made groundnut so dependable historically was its adaptability. The plant grows happily along riverbanks, woodland edges, and even poor soils where other vegetables struggle. Once planted, it spreads gradually, creating a living network of underground food that can be harvested season after season. Gardeners who grow it often describe the experience as uncovering hidden treasure beneath the soil each autumn. Because some tubers are always left behind during harvesting, the patch continues regenerating itself naturally. Meanwhile, the vines above ground keep expanding, capturing sunlight, and producing more underground growth each year. In traditional food systems, this reliability made groundnut incredibly valuable, offering a resilient crop that required little maintenance. Today, it remains one of the most overlooked vegetables, capable of quietly turning unused garden space into a long-term source of nourishing food. Number 6. Caucasian spinach, Hablitzia. Caucasian spinach is one of those rare vegetables that seems almost too good to be true for gardeners who struggle with traditional leafy greens. Native to mountainous regions where weather can shift dramatically, this climbing perennial developed an incredible ability to survive conditions that would quickly destroy ordinary spinach plants. Instead of growing as a low, fragile rosette like common spinach, Caucasian spinach sends long vines upward, scrambling across trellises, fences, and nearby structures. Once established, it transforms vertical space into a living curtain of edible leaves that returns year after year without replanting. The plant emerges early in spring when many other vegetables are still dormant, producing tender young leaves that can be harvested continuously for weeks. As temperatures rise and other greens begin to bolt or fade, Caucasian spinach keeps climbing and producing fresh growth. Gardeners who grow it quickly realize they've planted something closer to a permanent food source than a seasonal crop. One mature plant can supply an impressive amount of greens throughout the growing season, especially when given a structure to climb. Its resilience also makes it ideal for shaded gardens where many vegetables fail to thrive. Over time, the vine thickens and becomes more productive, turning into a dependable perennial that quietly delivers harvests every year. In many ways, Caucasian spinach represents a forgotten category of vegetables that weren't meant to be replanted every spring, but instead were designed by nature to keep feeding gardeners for decades. Number 7. Salsify. Salsify may be one of the most mysterious vegetables many gardeners have never heard of, yet it once held an important place in European kitchens. Above ground, the plant produces long, narrow leaves that resemble coarse grass, making it easy to overlook in a garden bed. But below the surface, a long, pale root slowly develops, storing nutrients and energy throughout the growing season. This root is where the magic happens. When cooked, it carries a subtle flavor that early cooks often compared to oysters, earning the plant its unusual nickname. Historically, salsify became popular because it was both reliable and surprisingly adaptable. It tolerates cooler temperatures, grows well in soils that frustrate other root vegetables, and remains harvestable late into the season when many crops have already finished producing. Gardeners appreciated the fact that it required very little attention once planted. The roots develop slowly and steadily underground, protected from weather swings that can damage more delicate vegetables. When autumn arrives, the soil hides a crop ready to be harvested just when fresh vegetables become scarce. Another advantage is its storage ability. Once harvested, the roots keep well for long periods, making them valuable for winter cooking. Even today, gardeners who rediscover salsify often become fascinated by its quiet productivity. It doesn't demand constant watering or perfect conditions. Instead, it patiently develops underground, proving that some of the most dependable food crops are the ones quietly growing where we rarely think to look. Number 8. Orach, mountain spinach. Before modern spinach varieties dominated grocery stores and seed catalogs, orach was one of the most widely grown leafy greens in European gardens. The plant is immediately recognizable once it begins growing because its leaves often display vibrant colors ranging from deep green to striking shades of crimson and purple. This visual beauty made it popular in old cottage gardens where vegetables were expected to be both useful and ornamental. But its real value lies in how incredibly adaptable it is. Unlike many delicate greens that struggle during hot weather, orach continues producing leaves long after other plants begin to wilt. Gardeners historically relied on it because it could grow in difficult soils and unpredictable climates where more demanding crops failed. The leaves have a mild, slightly salty flavor that works well in salads, cooked dishes, or soups, making it a versatile addition to the kitchen. What truly sets orach apart is how willingly it reseeds itself. Once a few plants are allowed to mature and scatter their seeds, new seedlings often appear naturally the following season. Over time, this creates a self-renewing patch of greens that returns without deliberate planting. Many gardeners eventually discover that orach behaves almost like a friendly volunteer in the garden, showing up where the soil welcomes it and continuing to provide harvests year after year. In an age of carefully managed vegetable beds, orach reminds us that some plants were originally meant to thrive with very little human intervention. Number 9. Sea kale. Sea kale is one of the most unusual vegetables ever cultivated in traditional European gardens, largely because of the harsh environments it naturally inhabits. Along rugged coastlines where salty winds batter the soil and sand shifts constantly, most vegetables simply cannot survive. Sea kale evolved precisely for those conditions. Its thick bluish leaves form a sturdy rosette close to the ground, allowing it to endure intense coastal weather that would destroy more delicate plants. Historically, gardeners recognized its resilience and began cultivating it inland as a reliable perennial food source. What makes sea kale special is the variety of edible parts it produces throughout the season. In early spring, tender shoots emerge from the soil and can be harvested when they are still pale and delicate. As the season progresses, the leaves themselves become edible greens that can be cooked or used in a variety of dishes. Once established, the plant continues returning year after year from the same root system. Gardeners appreciated this reliability because it meant fresh vegetables could appear early in the growing season without the effort of replanting. Its tolerance for poor soil also made it valuable in gardens where other crops struggled. While modern vegetable production shifted toward more uniform annual crops, sea kale quietly faded into obscurity. Yet the plant still possesses the same remarkable ability to thrive in challenging environments, offering a resilient and productive option for gardeners willing to rediscover this coastal survivor. Number 10. Hamburg parsley. Most people recognize parsley as a simple garnish sprinkled over meals, but Hamburg parsley tells a completely different story. Instead of being grown primarily for its leaves, this unusual variety is cultivated for the thick root developing beneath the soil. At first, the plant appears almost identical to ordinary parsley, producing familiar green foliage that many gardeners overlook without realizing what lies below. As the growing season progresses, however, a long creamy-colored taproot forms underground, resembling a cross between a carrot and a parsnip. This root carries a rich, slightly sweet flavor that made it an important vegetable in historic European kitchens. Gardeners valued Hamburg parsley because it offered two harvests from the same plant. The leaves could be picked throughout the season for cooking, while the root matured slowly underground until autumn. Once harvested, the roots stored well for months, providing a reliable winter vegetable when fresh crops were scarce. Another reason it thrived historically was its resilience. The plant tolerates cooler temperatures and relatively poor soil compared to many root vegetables that demand precise conditions. Gardeners often found that it quietly produced a dependable crop without constant care. Over time, however, as modern agriculture shifted toward easier-to-process vegetables, Hamburg parsley gradually disappeared from many seed catalogs. Yet for those who grow it today, the plant still delivers the same reliable dual harvest that once made it a valued staple in traditional home gardens. Number 11. Chayote. Chayote is one of the most astonishingly productive vegetables you can grow if given enough space to climb. Native to Central America, this vigorous vine has been cultivated for centuries in regions where food security depended on reliable crops capable of producing large harvests. At first, the plant may seem modest as its young vines begin searching for support structures. But once established, chayote becomes incredibly energetic, sending long tendrils across fences, trellises, and even small trees as it expands through the garden. The plant rewards this growth with a steady supply of pale green fruits that resemble wrinkled pears. Each fruit contains a single seed and can be used in a variety of dishes, from stir-fries to soups and roasted meals. What truly sets chayote apart is its productivity. One healthy vine can generate dozens of fruits during the growing season, transforming vertical garden space into an abundant source of food. Gardeners historically appreciated how little maintenance the plant required once it started climbing. It tolerates heat, adapts to different soil conditions, and continues producing as long as warm weather remains. In traditional gardens, it often grew along fences or structures where it could spread freely without interfering with other crops. Because each fruit contains a viable seed, gardeners could simply replant a mature fruit the following year to start another vine. This self-contained cycle of planting and harvesting made chayote a dependable and remarkably generous vegetable for generations of growers. Number 12. Cardoon. Cardoon is a dramatic plant that looks almost like it belongs in an ornamental garden rather than a vegetable patch. Closely related to the artichoke, it grows tall and architectural, producing massive silver-green leaves that can stretch outward like living sculptures. In Mediterranean regions, this striking plant was historically cultivated not only for its beauty, but also for the edible stalks hidden within its leafy structure. When prepared correctly, those thick stalks become tender and flavorful, carrying a taste that resembles artichoke hearts with subtle earthy undertones. Farmers valued cardoon because it thrived in hot climates where many vegetables struggled to survive. Its deep roots allow it to access moisture far below the soil surface, giving it impressive drought tolerance once established. Over time, a single plant can become enormous, producing a large harvest from one planting. Traditional growers often blanched the stalks by covering them to reduce bitterness, creating pale tender stems ready for cooking. While the plant requires some preparation before harvesting, its resilience and productivity made it worth the effort in regions where reliable crops were essential. As agriculture modernized and shifted toward easier vegetables, cardoon slowly faded from common gardens. Yet it remains one of the most impressive edible plants a gardener can grow, combining dramatic beauty with a long history of culinary use that stretches back centuries. Number 13. Cross, Chinese artichoke. Cross, sometimes called Chinese artichoke, produces one of the most unusual vegetables hidden beneath garden soil. Above ground, the plant appears modest, forming clusters of leafy stems that resemble mint growing quietly among other crops. But underground, something far more intriguing develops. Small spiral-shaped tubers begin forming along the roots, each one resembling a tiny ivory-colored sculpture curled into delicate ridges. When harvested, these tubers reveal a crisp texture and nutty flavor that works beautifully in stir-fries, salads, and pickled dishes. Historically, croissant gained popularity in parts of Europe and Asia because it was surprisingly easy to grow. The plant spreads gradually beneath the soil, producing clusters of tubers that multiply over time. Gardeners often found that once it established itself, the patch continued regenerating year after year without much intervention. Harvesting simply involved digging around the plant and collecting the tubers while leaving some behind to continue growing. This underground network slowly expanded, turning small plantings into productive beds. The crop also proved resilient in varying soil conditions, tolerating heat and moderate neglect better than many delicate root vegetables. Because of its unusual appearance and unfamiliar name, croissant eventually faded from mainstream agriculture, overshadowed by more recognizable crops. Yet its ability to quietly multiply underground makes it one of the most intriguing forgotten vegetables, still available to modern gardeners seeking something both productive and unique. Number 14. Yard-long bean. Yard-long beans redefine what productivity looks like in a vegetable garden. Unlike ordinary bush beans that produce short pods for a limited time, these climbing vines grow with astonishing energy once they find a structure to support them. Originating in warm regions of Asia and Africa, Yard-long beans evolved in climates where plants needed to grow quickly and produce heavily during extended heat. The vines respond to these conditions by stretching upward along trellises and fences, sending out long, slender pods that can grow dramatically longer than typical beans. Some pods reach lengths that surprise first-time growers, hanging like green ribbons from the climbing vines. Gardeners who plant them often underestimate how prolific they can become. A single vine may produce pods continuously for weeks once it begins fruiting, turning a simple trellis into a vertical harvest zone. The beans are typically picked young while still tender, encouraging the plant to keep producing more pods in response. Their adaptability also contributes to their productivity. Yard-long beans tolerate heat and relatively poor soil while continuing to grow vigorously throughout the warm season. Historically, they became essential crops in regions where reliable harvests were crucial for feeding families. In modern gardens, they remain somewhat overlooked, yet anyone who grows them quickly discovers how dramatically they outperform many traditional bean varieties in both size and sheer quantity of harvest. Number 15. Purslane. Purslane may be one of the most misunderstood edible plants ever to appear in a garden. Many people spend entire seasons pulling it out of their soil, believing it to be nothing more than a stubborn weed. Yet historically, this humble plant was cultivated deliberately as a nutritious vegetable across many cultures. Its low-spreading stems creep across the ground, forming dense mats of succulent leaves that store moisture inside their fleshy structure. This design allows purslane to thrive in conditions that would quickly destroy most vegetables. Extreme heat, poor soil, and minimal watering barely slow its growth. In fact, the plant often appears precisely where other crops struggle, quietly filling empty spaces with edible greenery. What makes purslane particularly remarkable is its nutritional value. The leaves contain unusually high levels of beneficial fatty acids and minerals compared to many common greens. Gardeners who decide to harvest it rather than remove it often discover a pleasantly crisp texture with a slightly tangy flavor. Because it spreads along the ground, purslane also functions as a natural living mulch, helping protect soil from drying out during hot weather. Over time, it reseeds itself easily, ensuring that new plants appear each season without deliberate planting. In traditional food cultures, this resilience made purslane a dependable source of fresh greens when other crops failed. What many modern gardeners consider a nuisance was once viewed as a gift from nature growing freely at their feet. Gardening has always been a conversation between people and the natural world. For thousands of years, farmers and gardeners chose plants that worked with nature instead of against it, crops that survived difficult seasons, vegetables that returned year after year, plants that produced abundance even when conditions were far from perfect. Many of those resilient vegetables slowly disappeared as agriculture changed. Uniform crops replaced diversity, convenience replaced resilience, and somewhere along the way, some of the easiest vegetables to grow were simply forgotten. But nature never truly loses its solutions. These 15 plants are living reminders that abundance doesn't always come from perfect soil, expensive fertilizers, or constant effort. Sometimes it comes from choosing the plants that were designed to thrive, the ones that grow stronger when neglected, the ones that quietly spread, climb, and produce food long after other vegetables have given up. And when you welcome those kinds of plants back into your garden, something interesting happens. Gardening stops feeling like a struggle. It starts feeling like cooperation, because the most successful gardens aren't the ones we control completely. They're the ones where we learn to work alongside the quiet intelligence of nature itself.